Hello again, and I'm back for another film review. After putting myself through the hell that was Batman and Robin last time, I thought this time I'd go for a great film. So today I'm going to give you a review of The Terminator. Yep, The Terminator. What is there to say about The Terminator? It's the film that pretty made Arnold Schwarzenegger's career, but I know he was in Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer beforehand, and he made a very tidy name off of that, but The Terminator is where he really did make his name. As well as James Cameron, the writer and director who went on to make great films like Aliens, Terminator 2, he also did True Lies, he won 3 Oscars alone, 11 in total for Titanic, and of course took 12 years off to do a lot of expedition work, and he came back and did Avatar. So, very certainly made a very tidy name off The Terminator. Of course, The Terminator went ahead and spawned possibly the greatest sequel of all time, but that is all down to personal opinion and is open for argument. In Terminator 2, it's just a shame that the Terminator franchise has gone somewhat off the rails, what with Terminator 3, Terminator Salvation, and then Terminator Genesis. It's just a horrible shame. But we're not here to talk about those films, we're here to talk about The Terminator. Now, what is there to say about The Terminator? Of course, as I mentioned before, it's the film that made Schwarzenegger's career, and he became pretty much the quintessential action star of the 1980s. It's a very simplistic plot in that it's just about a man sent from the future has to protect a woman who will give birth to the leader of the human resistance, because in the future humans are enslaved by machines known as Terminators and by an artificial intelligence known as Skynet. And Skynet, to try and combat this, send a Terminator back to kill Sarah Connor. And the great thing about this film is that everything to do with the whole mythology of the film, as well as the series in general, it's stated in one scene, just in one scene, where the Terminator is chasing after Sarah and Kyle after the shootout in Tech Noir, the nightclub scene. They're driving away and the Terminator is following them, and whilst Kyle and Sarah are trying to escape the Terminator, Kyle just explains everything. So he gives you what's happened in the future, what his mission is, and what could happen. That's it, and then the plot just plays out as it is, cat and mouse. It was just a perfect way to do it. So there's not much else you can say about the plot, and that's it. This is Schwarzenegger's quintessential role. He had something like 22 lines in Conan the Destroyer, and in this he's only got 14 lines, 14 pieces of dialogue, with one of them being the infamous "I'll be back." Schwarzenegger doesn't have to say a lot because he's a machine. A machine is not meant to... A machine like the Terminator, the T-800, it's not meant to be all talkative and try and psych you out kind of thing, like your prototypical bad guy. Is a machine. It's programmed to kill. It doesn't need to talk, which is brilliant. And Schwarzenegger relies solely on his actions, his movements, his facial expressions, the little facial expressions that he makes, and he relies completely on them to get his point across. In terms of like the real acting, Michael Biehn does a very good job, because with Michael Biehn you see like a real war-torn warrior, a person that has been through everything that the future has thrown at him, and now he's being chucked into a completely different timeline because of his mission, and he has to try and either change the future or protect the future as it is. And you just see the character change as well. You see him change from this real, because because he's got a bit of a hard exterior to begin with when you first meet him, and when in Tech Noir, and he's just barking orders at her. But obviously Sarah's only, at the time and during the film, is only 19, so she's still essentially a kid. She doesn't know what she's in for. And Linda Hamilton does a great job with showing her change as well, as this young, naive unbeliever of what's happening, and the next thing you know, she's like, is it real? Is what he's saying is real? And Sarah's like, get up, soldier, on your feet, and just pulls him up, finally becoming the leader that the human resistance recognizes, the people of the future recognize. Going back to Michael Pean, you see him subtly change, and you see much more to the character as well. And he admits to Sarah that he went back through time for her because he was in love with her, and he was in love with either the ideals or the ideology, or even the myth of Sarah Connor. It was as he explains, it was a chance to meet the legend, so he took it, and he's in love with her. So you see another different part of his character aspect. Also, as well, you got to give it to the makeup department for creating the Terminator effects on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those Terminator effects are, for 1984, fantastic. Of course, nowadays, if you wanted to try and create something like that, you just use motion detectors, and examples of something like that would actually be something like The Dark Knight. To create the effect of his face, it wasn't like makeup or anything like that, it was just motion detectors planted across his face, and then they just digitally created the burns. So for 1984, to create the effects of the eye, to create the effects of the metal endoskeleton underneath the human flesh and things like that, it was fantastic. Fantastic for 1984. Like, I still rate The Terminator as a film that can still today stand up against most action films that you get, most of the Hollywood blockbusters that are released. The Terminator can still stand up against it, stand on its own 2 feet, and just be like, bring it on. I'm a classic. I'm going to be standing the test of time. And you know what? 32 years later, it still is. It's still standing the test of time. Again, the action sequences in the film as well, you've got to give props to them, because obviously they're part of it as well. The chase scenes as well, like the tanker chase. You got the chase after Tech Noir. You got the great iconic scene where the Terminator, after saying his iconic line, "I'll be back," drives through the police door window and starts slaughtering cops. Brilliant, just brilliant. There's nothing else you can say about the action sequences. They keep you on the edge of your feet. They're fun, exciting. It's like, oh, are they going to make it? But obviously, in your heart of hearts, you know they're going to make it, because like the hero has to win. Even though, spoiler alert, Kyle Reese does die with the Terminators. So let's talk about the Terminators and Stan Winston. Of course, Stan Winston is the creator of the Terminator puppets. He was also part of the makeup department to try and get the designs on Arnold Schwarzenegger, the makeup on Schwarzenegger when his face has been blown off and all of that stuff. And Stan Winston really was a genius with this. If you know the scene where the Terminator is performing like manual surgery on his hands, and you see on the inside the parts of the Terminator, and like he's fixing himself, basically. He's had to cut open his arm and he's fixing himself. Stan Winston created that, so well done. And then when the Terminator is performing surgery on his damaged eye as well, by cutting open around the eye and then ripping it out, and then you have that puppet of Schwarzenegger as well. You know, that's fantastic. Again, for 1984, it's brilliant. And then there's the Terminator in Cyberdyne after the tanker is blown up and it burns the Terminator, and all of its skin is just burnt off, and it's just the skeleton, and it's still alive, chasing Sarah and Kyle through Cyberdyne. Of course, to get like some proper like the full body shot of the Terminator moving through the building. Obviously, they had to use different forms of filmmaking, like you can tell that's stop motion. So that's a bit more crude by today's standards, but for 1984, it still works. It still works for 1984. And then there's like the up close shots of the Terminator, and again, its movements, the design of it. Again, that was just one of them things about the Terminator, and that makes it just brilliant. And you know, the Terminator was the sleeper hit of 1984. It performed so well at the box office. Point is that the Terminator, it performed so well that the Terminator, when I first watched it as a kid, I'd already watched Terminator 2, and by that point, Terminator 2 was firmly planted as my favourite film of all time. It's the film that got me into film and wanting to even make film, review film, and do what I'm currently doing. So if it weren't for the Terminator giving birth to Terminator 2, I wouldn't be here probably doing this. Obviously, there are other factors in there, but the Terminator is, like I said, one of those films that 32 years later, it's standing the test of time. It's still known as a classic. It's not one of your quintessential 80s films, say like a John Hughes film, like say Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's not a random 80s comedy, say like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's something more, and at times it's hard to really put your finger on how that something more is, because like I said, it's science fiction, action, film noir, it's a thriller. It's an amalgamation of 4 different genres, and it makes it work. And that's the beauty of the Terminator, because without the Terminator, we wouldn't have James Cameron doing Aliens, or doing Terminator 2, or True Lies, or Titanic, or Avatar. You can slag off Avatar or Titanic all you want, that's just your matter of opinion, but the fact is, he came out and he made those 2 films that are the 2 highest grossing films of all time. If it wasn't for that, yeah, Schwarzenegger, like I said, he had made Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. But if it wasn't for the Terminator, Schwarzenegger might not have been the action star that we all know and love. Michael Biehn, like I said, he's just doing his own thing these days. The last notable thing I remember seeing him in was in The Rock. You know, that, as far as I know, was his last real big Hollywood cinematic film. Linda Hamilton, last thing I remember seeing her in was Dante's Peak. So I think that was her last real cinematic film. But they're still doing their own thing, which is great. But their careers were made because of the Terminator. It deserves every plaudit that it gets. Every time there's a re-release in the cinema, it deserves every penny that people pay to go see that film. Every time someone watches it, you can't fault it. So, on that note, on a scale of 1 to 10 for the Terminator, 1 being, why did you make this? And 10 being, wow. this deserves everything. I'm going to give the Terminator a 9. Now, I understand that I was just saying that it deserves everything that it gets, blah blah blah. Yes. But I give the Terminator a 9 purely because of the fact that it is somewhat overshadowed, in my opinion, by Terminator 2. And the fact that the rest of the Terminator franchise has somewhat let it down. But hey. But overall, Terminator, 9 out of 10. Fantastic film. Always worth the watch. You can't fault it. It's a brilliant action film. It keeps you on the edge of your feet. Schwarzenegger, it's Schwarzenegger at his best as well. And it's a film that will always be worth a watch. If it's on the telly, I'll watch it. I'll stop and watch it, and I hope you do as well. I hope you stop and watch the Terminator, because it's fantastic. It's brilliant to watch. So, thanks for watching the review. I will be coming back with another one soon. Going to be moving on to a bit more of an independent film. Actually, my next two are going to be independent films, so I'm not going to give you any spoilers on what they are. So, keep an eye out for some more film trivia as well, because I've got plenty in the pipeline, working on quite a lot. Keep an eye out for some more football trivia, working on those as well. And also keep an eye out for some other things as well as today in film history. If you like what you see, give us a like, give us a share, subscribe to Directive 4, and we will see you for some more random trivia.